That means it's official. Well, welcome everybody. We're so excited to hope that y'all can join us today for this great presentation, What's Next for Major Gifts. I'm Teresa. I'm the president of APRA Maryland. Just a couple of kind of talking points before we get started, and I introduce Sarah. So obviously this session is recorded. It will be available to everyone afterwards. So you'll get the link once we get that posted on our channel. We have a couple of exciting events coming up. On September 13th, our partners at AFP Western Maryland are actually having a signature event, the Mental Game of Fundraising. We're happy to partner with their chapter. And because of this partnership, if you all would like to join them for that, you can register for the member price using code NPS22. I'll drop all the details in the chat so you guys can have that, take a look, go join the chapter for a great program. And here at APRA Maryland on October 13th, we're going to have a presentation about celebrating alumni career milestones and increasing alumni engagement. So again, that's with us here at APRA Maryland on October 13th. You can see all the details on our website. Finally, let me just go ahead and get started for this presentation. So we're happy to have Sarah here. I actually first met Sarah, I don't know if she remembers this, but way back in 2015 at my very first APRA Maryland conference. It was actually my first professional conference period, and I just happened to sit with Sarah at a table in the back. We had some great conversations, so I'm very excited that she's here today giving this presentation about what's next for major gifts. DonorSearch has been a sponsor of APRA Maryland for longer than most of us remember. They have been great supporters of us, especially since their HQ is based in Maryland. And we just really appreciate their support over the years. It's especially during COVID has allowed us to provide lots of quality free content to people. And we're just so thankful to have them on board with us. So Sarah, I'll go ahead and pass it along to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Teresa. And yeah, I guess we have been members of APRA Maryland for at least 15 years. Because we're actually in our 15th year here at DonorSearch. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here with all of you. I hope to see some of you guys at some conferences, or if we did connect at the APRA International Conference, it's nice of you to join again. So I am the Executive Vice President, and I'm actually a co-owner at DonorSearch now. We are a family-owned and operated business. And yeah, I've been doing this for about 15 years and have worked with thousands of different organizations over the years. It's a joy of mine to be able to be speaking with you, but also talk strategy and talk about data. We do this all day long, and it's nice to be with a group that appreciates that as well. So a quick outline of our topics today. So we are going to do an introduction to DonorSearch. Just to give a little bit of background as to who we are and what we do and how we provide that. And then we'll talk a little bit about the philanthropic trends that we saw in Giving USA and what we're also seeing in 2022 and how that relates to major gifts. Additionally, we'll talk a little bit about some of the nonprofit challenges that we've been hearing from our clients. And I would love if you guys would participate as well. Feel free to use the chat when that comes up. And then how can you use AI and some of the technology that's available now to help mitigate some of those challenges, or how to overcome those big things that are in the way of getting to the people that can and will make a difference to you. So feel free to use the chat. Should be fun. If I don't know the answer to a question, maybe somebody else will on the call, or we can have a lively discussion, or we can follow up. So with that, we'll get started. So a little bit about DonorSearch. We are very much focused on providing the best philanthropic data as well as prospect research to nonprofits of all shapes and sizes. Our key values are listed here, and we live and breathe by them. They include excellence, and quality information that we're providing to our clients and our partners. Innovation is also at the core of what we do, and how a lot of the tools that we provide to our organizations, how they come about is like very much focused in, what's new, how can we use the new technology that's available to improve a process or search tool that maybe needed that breath of fresh air, so to speak. Collaboration is also key to how we operate. So working with organizations like yours, or just even hearing some of the feedback that we get from clients on a day-to-day, some of the partners that we work about. We're always striving to bring excellent information and solutions to you, as well as incorporating that innovation. And then integrity. We are family owned and operated, but not everybody is out there that works by those values, but we're very much focused on trust. We're very much focused on being transparent with you and what sort of information you're getting, how we're getting to those different data points. And then of course, growth. We actually work with over 8,000 different clients now, and we have 75 employees across the states. I can tell you that's not how it was 15 years ago. It was very much focused in our upstairs living room. So, 15 years later is pretty cool to look back on that. But yeah, we have grown each of those 15 years, and our products and services, of course, have evolved over time. We also provide over 40 different CRM integrations. Those include Salesforce, DonorSearch, Bloomerang. So if you're curious about how you can integrate some of these workflows and processes into your system, there's likely a solution for that. And then, of course, we are active Giving Institute members. So it's pretty important to the core that we know to be connected with all of the other experts in the industry and understand, what are those philanthropic trends? What are other organizations seeing? And how can we make sure that we're delivering the best information and insight to you? So, and of course, this photo on the right here is with the CEO, who I've known for a very long time now. This was our 10-year anniversary. And if you were there, that was the APRA International Conference in LA. And we had that rooftop where we saw all the fireworks and stuff. It was a great event. So had to do a little throwback there. All right. And then one other point too is you may have seen some of these folks around. They are all donor searchers, and combined on this leadership team, we have almost 200 years of nonprofit experience, which is crazy. It doesn't mean we're old, it means we're experienced, right? So each of these folks come from a different and diverse background of how they came into the nonprofit industry, whether they were leading a multi-million dollar nonprofit organization, whether they had consulting background, whether they grew up in the industry. They're all bringing, and in fact, some of them were actually competitors at competitive organizations, and now they're here. But they're all bringing some of the best insight and intelligence to all of you. So just wanted to, let you know that we really are striving to bring you the most effective information and insight to you as possible. So these are some of the organizations that we work with, and they are also all using some of the AI technology that we are providing. In addition to that, we've had a lot of really great feedback. I won't dwell on it too much, but if you're curious about how all of that works, we're happy to share. And what you can expect from us from a technology standpoint is we're going to continue to break the glass ceiling. So we actually process, we do screenings, we do AI solutions, we have users that use our online tool, and we actually process over 15 million records a month. So there's always been this question of, capacity. What is my organization going to be able to do? Do I have too many records? Can I get the information that I need on them? And the answer is yes. There's never an organization that has too many records. We can always get you those insights. So we actually process about 15 million records a month and millions every week. And this was a fun stat. You may actually see it on social media, is that 5 DonorSearch profiles are processed every second of every day, 24/7 for 365 days a year. So it's kind of a crazy number. It also talks about how integrated the DonorSearch solutions are within our different CRMs, as well as the use of it. So And then from a thought leadership standpoint, if you guys are interested in additional content, Teresa was just talking about this, we have a Mastermind Series where actually we provide free CFRE credits to all of the people that attend. And just this year, we've actually given out over 2,000 CFRE credits to those that have attended our Mastermind Series. So that's presented by Jay Frost. And if you're interested in actually being a part of that, feel free to reach out. There's also a book coming from one of our wonderful colleagues at DonorSearch, from Nathan Chappell, called The Generosity Crisis. Originally, it was supposed to be released in December because there was a paper shortage. Who knew, right? But now it looks like they've overcome those challenges, and it looks like we'll have a release date in November. So we'll talk a little bit about this, when we look at the giving trends and what's been going on in the industry. But it's a great book by Nathan Chappell, Brian Crimmins, as well as Michael Ashley. And then the Chronicle of Philanthropy references some of these insights as well. So, why did 20 million households stop giving to charity? And there's a lot of, debate about that and how can we do better when it comes down to fundraising. All right, so let's kick it off with the philanthropic trends that we've seen in 2022. So this is something you guys have probably heard and talked about, maybe within your organization, or maybe it's within the different conferences that you've attended or different webinar sessions. But for the first time in nearly 2 decades, only half of US households have donated to charity, according to a bunch of different studies that are out there. And the findings are confirming that there's a trend, that the amount of people that are giving is declining. So here you can see in 2000 that about 2/3 of the population were giving donations. Now 2018 and even in 2022, it's less than half of that. So there is this concern of, what is the drop off? How do we, pivot? How do we take this information and make sure that we can continue to engage our donors? Sorry. All right, so some other changes, right? So this meme, I don't know if you have seen it, but it's the moment you realize that 2022 is actually pronounced 2022. So we're seeing a lot of the same things that were a challenge in 2020 that are still now here, right, in 2022. So we still have, COVID-19 pandemic, while it's not as, there's vaccines, there's booster shots, there's, sort of this ability to overcome it. We're still feeling the effects of it, right? There's work from home. There are people that have lost, family members or colleagues, we're definitely still feeling the effects of that. There's also a continuation of racial injustice and social justice movements that have been going on. DEI is something that we hear about and talk about and are constantly working towards. So that is continuing to be a presence. A new one, right? Inflation is at the highest that it has been in 40 years. So how do we overcome that? And how has that even affected the giving trends that we're going to look at? And then the Great Resignation. I don't know if any of you have quit your job, or maybe you know somebody that quit your job to start something new and fresh. But I believe that was over 40 million people that switched careers, which is, again, something that the nonprofit industry we're used to, right? We're used to turnover, we're used to people changing and moving to different organizations, but the rest of the country is feeling that, and maybe we felt it even more so within our organization. And then there was a strong market. We saw that the richest got even more rich. We saw that the top 1% gained $6.5 trillion in wealth. And there's even some side effects of that we're also seeing on the philanthropic side. So a lot has changed. Some of the things are still remain consistent, but we're definitely in a moving time frame. I don't know how else to say it. Things are constantly changing. Things are not staying static. All right. So if you have seen this pie graph before, then you are ahead of the curveball here. So this is the Giving USA report, or one of the highlights from the Giving USA. And if you're not familiar with Giving USA, it is the longest running annual report in America. And what it does is it looks at all of the different organizations, nonprofits, and looks to see what the trends are year over year. So it's a fantastic organization. DonorSearch is also a member, as well as probably many of the organizations that you work with. So what we see here is that in 2021, contributions were $484 billion. While that sounds like a really high number and it seems like maybe it grew a little bit, it actually remained flat. That's the big key takeaway here, is that between 2020 and 2021, giving has not increased. And that's something that's a little surprising, and something that we're keeping in mind is like, well, how does that all break out? What we see here also is that there was an increase as well as in bequests, and that we believe to be actually a side effect of COVID-19, where some of those gifts were realized. And then there's a little bit of an uptick with corporations. You'll hear a lot about how some of the corporations are having some pressure put on them to be more philanthropic. There's also a conversation that's been going on about, maybe some mistrust with nonprofits and a little bit more trust with corporations. So how do you take that information and start to, overcome that? All right. And then what we also see here are some of the highlights from the NTE codes, or the categories of givings. So some of the highlights here is that there's been an increase with donor advised funds, which are actually categorized in the public society and benefit category. So we saw a little bit of an uptick there. Education, while it has decreased from a year over year standpoint, we saw that some of those donor dollars actually went to academic medicine. So academic medicine was more reported with the healthcare side of things. It wasn't necessarily reported with the higher education. And then arts, cultures, and humanities had a rebound. That is also up. We've been seeing consistently that arts, cultures, and humanities has gone up, but they did feel a little bit of a hit when COVID happened. And it appears that they've overcome that, which is great. As well as environmental organizations and the animals, we're seeing more of an increase there. Religious organizations, they're feeling a little bit of a hit. While that remains the top category, it is on a decline, which is actually continues to be a trend. So there's speculation there too, is that maybe that's a difference in the generations that are coming through. What is the participation rate with religious organizations for the younger group versus their parents. So while we talked a little bit about the individual giving on the two previous slides, while that giving remained flat, we actually saw that it came from less households. So we introduced the mega donor, right? We've all heard about Mackenzie Scott and her amazing contributions to different organizations. But it does, bring about this question of, well, even though you might be in alignment with the organizations that she's giving to, we are sort of seeing that the wealthy, the ultra high net wealthy are starting to make an impact of, where we're seeing success happen, where the focus is. So mega gifts made up 3.1% of all individual giving in 2020. Last year, it was 10 mega donors that gave a total of nearly $15 billion in donations in 2021. Well, Mackenzie Scott is now close to $13 billion, I think was the article that I just read the other day, which is pretty amazing, girl power. But we're also seeing a bit more of this trend of where the dollars coming from. They're coming from a select few. So this is more exaggerated as well with the wealth income disparity, where, we have the majority of households are giving less, and we're seeing more impact from the top percent. How do we re-engage our majority of our donors that are not maybe this ultra high net worth, and, show them the benefits of, the philanthropy that they contribute via dollars versus just Maybe they feel like they're being generous through volunteer work or acts of kindness or whatever that may be. So that's actually a whole nother conversation that's going on, as well as, what is the definition of philanthropy? How has that changed through the years? Is it just donor dollars that are being contributed, or is it, acts of engagement with the organization? So we're going to go into a little bit of a reflection back to you, and hopefully you guys can start to see your questions come up, or maybe some thoughts that you have. So this is, how are you doing, right? So there is actually a panel discussion that DonorSearch did on Giving USA, and we're comparing the Giving USA report to your organization. So how does your institution's giving relate to Giving USA averages? Are you seeing a decline in maybe the individual donations that are coming through? Maybe you're seeing an increase from donor advised funds, or maybe you're an organization that's either the arts or religious organization where you're feeling different impacts of how the donations are coming through. Another question here is, are your best donors aging out? Are you concerned about reaching a younger generation? These are things that we've also been hearing a lot, is how do you communicate with a younger group that's coming in that might have a different definition of philanthropy? Another one is, from a tactical standpoint, are you dealing with silos of data and information in multiple places? Are you trying to aggregate, your marketing information, your email information, your gift history information, your, wealth screening data, your philanthropy information, maybe swag they bought, and trying to bring it all together into, one score that says, well, are they going to give to my organization or not? And at what level are they going to do? And another one is, have your fundraising goals shifted? This is something that we see a lot too that's coming up, is either there's a campaign that was put on hold that has started again, or maybe there's a different priority that's taking place. We didn't see that this was successful, 3-4 years ago. Let's focus on this over there. So these are big challenges, and I encourage you to feel free to use the chat if you have any insights there. And Teresa, it looks like you have a comment too. Feel free to share.
Yeah, so in my day job, I work for the Foundation Fighting Blindness, and a big thing we're celebrating at the moment is that for the first time in 10 years, we've actually had an increase in the number of donors to our organization that made a gift during the year. So from fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 22, we have increased our donor pool without seeing a significant reduction in actual average gift. I think the average gift went down like $5. But so now we're focusing on continuing that acquisition of new donors, and then also retaining these donors, get them to continually give to the organization, which is very exciting for us.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's the new challenge with the positive, right? Is how do you retain those new donors that come in, and how do you repeat the same process of getting the new donors? How can you expand on that? That's a great comment there. Thank you. And then Sarah, it looks like you have a comment too. Feel free to take yourself on mute if you want to share it.
Oh, hi. So from Salisbury University, we are still having a bit of a challenge with our alumni participation rate, and that obviously there's a connection to number of donors as well. So obviously there was somewhat of a contraction in 2020, and we just haven't quite made up all that ground yet. And we have ever more alumni to engage.
Yeah, and I think you're not alone in that at all, especially with the impact of COVID and everything that happened from a higher ed standpoint. Maybe some of those alumni felt disconnected, or how do you re-engage them? Maybe some of your events were put on hold. There's a lot of other competing priorities for them too, right? Maybe there's a different cause that came into play. So yeah, these are all challenges, I think, that we're hearing across the board is, it's Some of them are the same challenges, but with new environment, new parameters that we have to overcome and deal with. So thank you both for sharing that. That's great. So getting to the heart of this presentation, right? So talking about major gifts. So what constitutes defining a major gift is, constitutes your organization's largest financial contributions. And you might have principal gifts that, are larger than your major gifts, but we're talking about, gifts that have an impact within your institution. They typically have the highest return on investment, more so than like with a direct mail or maybe even an event that you have, because you're going to see those dollars translate much greater in a shorter amount of time sometimes. We also see that the fundraising totals of these major gifts, they come from either 5 to 10% of the donors. This could even be smaller, just dependent upon your organization. You might see that 1 to 5% of your donors are contributing those major gift dollars. So these are all things that just highlight the fact that you have to be strategic when it comes to who you're talking to, where you're spending your time and energy in order for you to achieve that ROI. All right, so this is just kind of a simplification of some of the researchers' challenges, right? So you have short time frames to deliver data, and oftentimes it's coming from data silos, right? You're also having the need to qualify more prospects, right? So whether that's from an acquisition standpoint, or maybe it's just, re-engaging some of those alumni that have dropped off. How do you get more people? How do you make sure that they're in the right segmentation or bucket in order for you to, bring them to the next level? Also have those changing fundraising goals and initiatives, as well as the turnover and lack of support. So these are things that, aren't necessarily new, but again, in this new environment, how do we overcome them with the constant, feeling of pressure? Maybe you feel that pressure within your organization. So if you think there's a challenge that was missed here, as like kind of a summary, feel free again to use the chat. Would love to hear from you. All right. So this is kind of going again back to basics here. So major gifts, they need prospect research. So if you were wondering, if you had, any question in your mind, does your organization need prospect research? Your organization needs prospect researchers. There's no question. And in order to be successful at achieving those major gift donations and identifying those people that can take you there, you need it. So this is actually a study that we helped sponsors a few years ago now, but those organizations that use prospect research almost in every year and most of the times achieved their fundraising goals 84% of the time, compared to those that did not use prospect research. They only reached their goals 65% of the time. And then those that never used it, right, seldom or never, the stats are even more compelling, right? So it's this whole idea that, or it's not a whole idea, but it's this really important key takeaway that your organization needs prospect research in order to go to the next level, in order to achieve their fundraising efforts, as well as make their major gifts. So some considerations, when you're thinking about, okay, well, we have these new goals. We want to, bring in new technology. We want to figure out how we can do things better than before. There's some considerations to keep in mind as you're moving forward. That would be, the infrastructure that you have in place. What sort of CRM or integration and API do you have, and how does your IT support you? Is it your single source of truth, or do you have data kind of everywhere? What sort of regulations do you have to deal with, right? So there's this constant conversation as well about, what the laws are going to be, what sort of HIPAA regulations are out there, but what is your organization's policy? So what do you need to keep in mind? And then the pain points. So where do you need to do better? How can you overcome some of these big pain points that maybe your organization is feeling or reeling? And is leadership ready to try something new, or is leadership your pain point? maybe there's some sort of hesitation or lack of inertia when it comes to bringing in innovation. And then the data used to drive the decisions. Is it accurate? Do you feel like it's giving you the full picture, or are you missing pieces of that? Do you feel like it's accurate, or are you spending a lot of time combing through that information? So these are all considerations as you try to move forward with your goals of major gifts. So while the landscape has changed and continues to change, the need to bring in the best practices and smart technology is key. So we're just going to talk a little bit about how you can do that. So the first is taking a look at predictive markers for major gift donors. So this has not changed really at all. Like when you are looking at either your wealth screening data, or you're looking at detailed profile, or you're looking at your constituents and you want to know where you need to start, you've got this roadmap, this markers of philanthropy that can help you get there. So the first one is you're giving to your organization, right? Are they giving to you right now? That's by far going to be the best predictor of them making a major gift to you. The pro to that is that data is easily accessible. It should be inside of your CRM. The cons to that is maybe it's not great, maybe it's spotty, maybe your leadership has changed, maybe your focus has changed. You could have all different reasons why you don't want to just rely on that. And then there's always this adage of tell me something new, right? Tell me something I don't know is like necessarily going to be with the giving to your organization. The second is going to be giving to other nonprofits. So what we found is that if you give $5,000 or more somewhere else, they are much more likely to be a major gift prospect to you. So basically what you've uncovered there is their understanding of philanthropy, their understanding of fundraising, as well as the fact that you have this behavioral characteristic that says that they give money away, right? And $5,000 is that trigger, but it's also kind of a nice number too, because it tends to be the major gift level for a lot of organizations. Whether or not they're the trustee of a foundation is also key. So now you've also identified two vehicles for donations, right? You've identified the individual as well as the foundation that might have deeper pockets and can give larger gifts away. Political giving, won't spend too much time on here. This is something that you can either choose to use or not choose to use. I know there's a whole debate about that as well. But what we found is that if you have someone who's given $250 or more to a political contribution or campaign FEC, they are in the top 5% of the population that have done that. If you find somebody that's given $1,000 or more to an organization, you're in the top 1%. So 99% of us have never done that. And then when you get to $10,000 or more political contributions, what you find is that's this dead-on marker for wealth. So now you have ultra wealthy, you have philanthropy. And the thing to keep in mind there is that the scale is different. And then real estate. So real estate is also an important factor here. It's the fifth most predictive marker. Real estate is also something to keep in mind that depending on the geography, that valuation is going to be different. And of course, after COVID, we all know that the price market or the housing market has changed a lot as well. But if you have $2 million or more worth of real estate, that tends to be a really big indicator there, as well as if you have multiple properties. So if you have a donor that has, their primary residence as well as a vacation home, that can be even more telling from a standpoint of wealth that they have. And then the sixth marker are those that are either SEC insiders, so at the policy-making level of a publicly traded company, or they have their own business. So all of this information is accessible via, databases, via wealth screening. If your wealth screening doesn't provide that information, then we encourage you to take a look at all of the options that are out there, because that information is quite available. Okay, so that's your basics. That's kind of your foundation, your roadmap, where to get started. So let's talk about AI. Everybody's talking about AI. I saw a title one time that said it says like AI is kind of like sex. Everybody's talking about it, but nobody's doing it. So just kind of some humor in there for you. So how do you get started with it? What is the whole hubbub of it? So I'm here to break some of it down for you, just so you have an understanding of what it is. And the good news is that you're using AI every day, whether you're watching Netflix, whether you're looking at your phone, whether you're perusing Amazon, or even looking at shopping while we're doing this presentation. You are constantly, all of your data is getting collected, it's being turned up, and then for-profits are making smarter decisions based on that because they're using AI technology, right? So what we have here is just a graphical representation of some things to keep in mind on how it's used. So the first piece of this, when you're using AI to pinpoint your major gift donors, is to focus on giving level. So with this, you're going to have a concentrated effort to figure out where people are in your, quote unquote, gift pyramid, or in your, data analysis, where people are supposed to fit in. The other piece of this is breaking down silos. So the organizations that we work with, some of them are quite large, and they have things that have been, technology hasn't changed for a long time. So what that means is different pieces of donor information are in different siloed data. So how do we pull in, the swag information that maybe they purchased, or the events that they've attended, or the emails that they have opened and clicked through, in addition to the giving information, the wealth data, all of that. How do you pull that in? Well, the wonderful piece of AI is that you can do that, and you don't need a human to help you process that. So you don't need to spend the time trying to piecemeal everything together. What we can help you do is workflow that together, so that way, you're bringing all this information into one place. And it doesn't have to be us, it could be somebody else. The other piece to that is the dynamic scoring. So the beauty of AI is that it's not static, right? So we all know that wealth screening can age. It can be, you do it one time, and then maybe 3 years later, you come back and say, okay, well, it's time to refresh the score. And so much has changed in that 3-year period. Like if you think about now, today versus 3 years ago, pandemic was never on our mind, right? A lot of people's wealth has changed, a lot of their philanthropy, their interests, all of that has changed. So the beauty of AI is that as the information continues to be updated, and your donor buys new swag, or they give a new gift, or they attend a different event, all of that can be refed, and then there's a new scoring that happens. So today, maybe I'm not a great donor for the museum, but next month, after I go to one of their exhibits and I feel really, compelled or emotional about something, I make a donation, and all of a sudden now I've included more information that actually highlights the fact that I look like a better donor, a better prospect. Now I can be incorporated into a different funnel. So it's this whole idea of bringing in new engagement, new engagement and experiential data together. And then that's what this last icon here is that it's not just about the philanthropic and the wealth information anymore, but it's also about how are they experiencing your organization. So the traditional, or kind of the standard models, they might just look at an RFM, like how recently they gave, how frequently they gave, and the total amount of money. Well, we all know that that is like a 30-year-old model. And that it likely needs to be updated, right? We need to bring in other pieces of information that are going to highlight the affinity that a donor has to your organization. So in addition to the wealth and the giving patterns, it's what we just talked about, right? So there is no limit to the amount of information that you can pull in, which is going to help score your best donors, which is going to tell you new insights on how you engage with those folks, what your messaging is like. And again, why is this important? Well, we just went through the giving trends that, the amount of donors is decreasing. We have more challenges than we did before. We have competing priorities, and we're going to need to use some of this best technology or this new technology and work a little bit smarter in order to accomplish these more challenging goals. So this is like an example of how you might calculate engagement. So you have the characteristics of a donor, and then you have the characteristics of a non-donor. And what it does is it looks at, what was the graduation year? What are the wealth indicators or the degree types? What sort of CRM activity do we have? The number of gifts, the total of gifts, all of those things from the RFM plus some. Were they involved in Greek life? What was their largest gift? And then we also even bring in demographic data. So, what subscriptions do they have? What are their interests? And for one donor, you can actually have 1,000 different features associated with them. So instead of like a traditional 7, or maybe you have 10 or 30 different points on one person, you could actually understand your donor and have a score that says, okay, well, we looked at 1,000 of these different data points, features. Now we know, based on this information, who is most likely to give a gift in the next 12 months, and we know the size of that donation. And then you can bring in all of those other points that say, okay, well, we need to know from this school who graduated in this year that has this giving capacity, that hasn't been to an event in a long time. How do we start to re-engage them? How do we bring them back into the centerfold, which is, that conversation of re-engaging some of those alumni. The other part of that is it's dynamic, right? So as new information is coming through, your reprioritization can happen. You can start to say, okay, do my major gift officers have the right portfolio? So-and-so is complaining that they don't have enough good prospects. Well, let's take a look at those prospects. And are there other people that we could bring into their pool? Maybe there's somebody that's been missed by this traditional sort of wealth screening or analysis. So it's something that, again, is breaking down those silos. You set up the right workflow, and then you can reassess on whatever sort of basis makes sense for your organization and understand where people should be fitting into. The other part of this too is, this is kind of nonprofit 101, right? So the high likelihood and the high wealth, we're helping put people in those buckets, but you're not limited to just different sorts of pieces of information that you might traditionally have been to. So looking at the CRM summary data, transaction data, if you're in healthcare, what sort of clinical information is available based on your regulations, the HIPAA policies, the wealth and demographic and consumer data, social media, and then all kinds of pieces that are important to you. So if there was custom information that you wanted to make sure was part of that analysis, you can do that with machine learning and AI. So the other part of this is making sure that it's a repeatable process. So one of the challenges in the past is, you do a wealth screening, it takes up so many resources, you start and stop. Maybe you got halfway through your best prospects, but you never were able to go through all the way. The beauty of setting it up as a repeatable process is you can start to look, okay, what are the right major gift discovery calls? What was my refresh and review process for the major gift portfolios? Can I identify new prospects? What are the philanthropic interests? Using like a keyword search to say, well, tell me all the folks that are interested in giving to, say, for instance, Catholic causes, or Catholic causes at this level that are in this geographical region that have, $1 million contribution level. So, and then again, you could use that for events and visits as well. So we've seen this uptick of people wanting to communicate and be more involved on that personal level. You can now do that with all of these pieces of information. And this is just kind of a fun fact here on the DonorSearch AI benchmarking. Like I said, you don't have to use DonorSearch AI. If your company or organization is able to build that, we've seen that before as well. But right now, we're the only ones that are doing that from our standpoint. And what we were able to see is that we've averaged about 2,800 models per DonorSearch client. So what that means is if a hospital sends us their different databases, we've actually been able to look at over 2,800 models in order to give them the best prospects on who to talk to. The total models interrogated for all of the different DonorSearch AI clients has been over 33,000. And we've given predictions for over 22 million different donors. The other stats here on the left-hand side is just taking a look at, what are those different components. So the emails are actually really exciting. I know that sounds not very exciting the way that I just said it, but what we found is that in some cases, an organization wanted to know, why were we not getting the great acquisition for this list or for this email campaign that we sent out? Well, it turned out when they used specific words in either the subject or the content, they actually saw a decrease of donations. So I know we're here to talk about major gifts, but when you think about your entire strategy and how you're constantly trying to fine tune it and do better, sometimes it's not necessarily something that's obvious. You need to dig a little bit deeper and think about all of the different data points that you're aggregating. So with that, I am about to wrap up here, I think about 10 minutes early, but some of the key takeaways that I think would be great for everyone to keep in mind is that there is road work ahead, right? Like you have great challenges that are in front of you. The landscape is moving, it is shifting, and we're starting to see that. And who knows what's going to be, the giving trends this time next year. Hopefully we see an increase of donors, not just the donation dollars. And there is a need for smarter technology. So it's there, it's available. AI is something that, again, we're all using in the for-profit side. They're using it all the time. It's just a matter of what are the inhibitions? Is it, sort of a fear of talking about something new? Is it something that you think isn't affordable? Is it something that is just really hard? All of those things can be overcome. It's just a matter of getting started. Also looking at all of the aspects of the donor experience and their markers of philanthropy. That's going to be even more critical now, again, because we're seeing the donor numbers decreasing, right? So it all goes back to, well, what sort of message are they getting from your organization? Do they feel that they can trust it? People give because they feel like connected with that organization. They feel like their donor dollars can make a difference. And if we're not communicating or if that has dropped off a little bit, then it's time to re-engage that and figure out why. And this last line, it's a little cheesy, but it's something that we all know is like, don't forget that donors are people too. So what's interesting to them? What are their affinities to different organizations? What has changed in their life that maybe that might be part of the reason why they're not giving the way that they used to, or maybe that they can, it's just a matter of reconnecting with them. So those are some of the key takeaways. If you are at different conferences along the way here, feel free to reach out to us. I know we'll be at AASP and AHP, as well as a few other ones. But if you are in the area or you'd love to connect, say hi, grab a coffee, we would love to see you. And of course, you are more than welcome to reach out to me either today, here, now, or you can send me a quick email as well. So with that, I'll take a look also at your chat here. Yeah, so Teresa, it looks like you had a question. So a lot of people see AI as the next new best thing. Do you have any suggestions on explaining the limitations of AI or other mass data to our stakeholders? Great question. Thank you, Teresa. Yeah, great question. So yeah, there was this fear of people saying like AI would replace their job. And that is just not the case, right? AI is supposed to move you forward. It's supposed to propel you. It's supposed to help you do things in a better way. And it can really only accomplish like one task, right? It's not looking at everything. They're not robots. They're not coming for you or anything, but it's something that can help you be smarter and it can help you strategize in a more effective way. And I think that's, the key there, right, is, how do you present yourself to your organization to be more invaluable than ever? How do you continue to, rise within your organization, make an impact so that your organization can do better? And AI can just be a tool that you use to help you get there. Does that help, Teresa?
It does. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions here?
I'm looking through our chat history. Oh, it looks like Sarah added some more information to some of the challenges around prospect research. About alignment between development and prospect development. Are you pulling in the same direction? And our gift officer is strategically focusing on the best prospects that are identified by the research or prospect development team. So all great points, Sarah.
Yeah.
I fight that all the time. I also tend to find that people want the data, but then once you provide the information to them, they don't necessarily know how to follow up on it. So I've learned over my career to have very specific recommendations with that data and that information, and then hopefully buy-in from leadership to push them towards acting on that information.
Yeah. And so much of that is the communication, right? So it's like, it's like sitting down and saying, okay, and you can reframe it however you want, but be like, why are we not in alignment? We both want to raise dollars, right, for the organization. Like I can find you the best information possible on your donors. Like, why are we not connected? Like, what do you feel you need? And is that really the case? Like, do you actually need that information? Because sometimes you might not. Maybe it's just extra, but.
Mm-hmm. And
yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to read that and say Sarah agrees.
Yeah, it is bridging the gap. And what you'll find too, I didn't put it in these slides, but it's something we talk a lot internally, and it's something you've talked about before. There's a book called Crossing the Chasm. If you haven't read it, highly encourage you to read it, because what it is it talks about where different folks are in their ability to embrace technology. So it's like talks about your innovators, it talks about like your visionaries, it talks about your early adopters, and then you have everybody else that's kind of like this late adopters and the late majority, and then you have the laggards who are like, I'm going to still use a flip phone unless you make me, kind of thing, until it's not supported. Or I have like a 20-year-old Mac and I can't use it anymore because it just won't even turn on. Like, those are the people that, if you're thinking about your organization or your leadership, where do they fit in, and where do you fit into that? And it's kind of understanding that. So it's bigger gap than, or bigger tangent than I think, Sarah, you might have intended. Oh, awesome.
Okay, well, looks like we don't have any more questions in the chat. Going once, going twice. Okay, well, thank you so much, Sarah. There was so much great information in there. As I mentioned in the chat and earlier, everyone will be receiving a recording of the presentation, so you can go back and look at it, also share it with all your coworkers. So I hope you all have a great day, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Teresa, and have a great day at the beach.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.